Ta-na-na-na, ta-na-na-na-na-na-na, ta-na-na-na, ta-na-na-na-na-na-na, ta-na-na-na, ta-na-na-na-na-na-na-na, ta-na-na-na, ta-na-na-na-na-na-na-na. You are my friend, oh, you are my joy, you are my comforter, you are everything I desire when I feel so sad and lonely. You are the first on my mind. Lord, you are my friend, oh, you are my joy, you are my comforter, you are everything I desire when I feel so sad and lonely. You are the first on my mind.
Ganye wami abu semeni abu nandeni awu kukuki we somanla ne abokonga we nababa awu kukuki.
When you are in need, call on Jesus. He's got the power to lift you up.
When you are in need,
Please call on Jesus. He's got the power to lift you up.
kizakukoza gazuzo kizikazi gotando elisweni kizokukoza gazuzo kizikazi gotando elisweni. Oh, you are my, oh, you are my, you are my comforter, you are everything I desire when I feel so sad and lonely. You are the first on my mind. Ta-na-na-na-na-na, 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 ta-na-na-na-na-na-na-na-na.
Ameni.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Brother Lennard Denehey Memorial Lecture. Honorable Emmeline Pear, Minister for Education, Human Resource Development, Information and Religious Affairs, His Lordship Clyde Martin Harvey, Bishop of the Diocese of St. George in Grenada, His Excellency, Justice Anthony Carmona, feature speaker, former President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, Sister Maureen Alexander, Provincial Superior of the Sisters of St. Joseph of Cluny, former Principal of the St. Joseph Convent, St. George's, Brother Dennis Claviers, and Brother Robert Fanovich, Presentation Brothers and other Presentation Brothers, Father Emmanuel Kufri, Cathedral Administrator, other members of the clergy and religious sisters, Mr. Dominic Jeremiah, Principal of the Presentation Brothers College, Mr. Adrian Francis, Chairman of the 75th Anniversary Committee, members of the 75th Anniversary Committee, members of the Presentation Brothers College community, staff, students, and associates, invited guests, viewers on the various platforms. Again, a very warm welcome to you this evening for our first Brother Lennard Denehey Memorial Lecture. As you may be aware, the theme for this evening's discussion and lecture is The Role of the Catholic Educator in Forming Characters that are equipped to foster a readiness for service to the society. And of course, our feature speaker on this particular theme is none other than His Excellency Justice Anthony Carmona. Ladies and gentlemen, we move right into the program. We are a little bit late, and we apologize for that. We now invite to do the opening prayer Father Emmanuel Kufri, who will lead us off in the opening prayer. Father Kufre, could you unmute yourself?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we are.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. I'll start again. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Thank you, great God. Thank you, our Lord and Maker. At every age, you give us men and women to continue the mission of your Son, Jesus, and his church, founded by him. Thank you for the presentation, brothers. You founded this community of your messengers, the brothers of ours, and your sons. You founded them through your son, Blessed Edmund Rice, whom we celebrate today. Thank you for the gift of Brother Lennard and all the presentation brothers who have labored and who continue to labor to educate your children in different parts of the world, and in particular, here in Grenada. Thank you for our students and teachers, both past and present. As we give you thanks, Lord, we invite you and we implore you through the Holy Spirit, the Spirit of wisdom and understanding, to come and be present with us this evening as we listen, as we share our thoughts and renew our minds and hearts as we journey together along the way of life. Lord, please be the beginning and the end of all that we do and say. Give us grace and blessings. Give glory to your holy name and salvation to all of us, your children. We make our prayers through Jesus Christ, your Son, our Lord and friend and brother, who lives and reigns with you and in the unity of the Holy Spirit, God, forever and ever. Amen. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be your name. May your kingdom come. May your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us today our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses. And teach us to forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from every evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Thank you, Father Kufri. We now invite the playing of the national anthem. Thank you. We now continue the program, and we now invite one of our Form 5 students, Mr. Aaron Pierre, to give some welcoming remarks. Mr. Pierre?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am indeed honored to welcome you to the Presentation Brothers College 75th Anniversary Brother Lennard Denehey Memorial Lecture. This event is another opportunity to celebrate Presentation Brothers College service to nation building. Today, we reflect on the contributions that Catholic education has played in building characters that are ready for service to our nation. We will also listen and reflect on the presentations of persons who were formed by a tradition of educational excellence and values instilled by these institutions. These men and women have continued to shape our communities and the region. Furthermore, we would also be given the opportunity to hear about the founder of the Presentation Brothers and Christian Brothers, Blessed Edmund Rice. His selfless efforts to create a Catholic educational institution for the youth of his native Ireland was the beginning of many educational institutions around the world that would change the lives of many people who would otherwise never have had a chance to be educated. Catholic education has provided hope for men and women. They found this hope within the walls of these institutions, which were focused on forming social and spiritual virtues in their students. These educators have supported young men and women to pursue their dreams and ensure that they were achieved. In conclusion, some of the greatest persons who have walked through the door of change and who have become role models and pioneers in our society are persons who emerged from some of our Catholic institutions, such as the Presentation Brothers College. We hope that these institutions will continue to be incubators for more of these characters to be birthed for building Grenada and the region. Once again, welcome, and please enjoy the evening's proceedings.
Thank you, Aaron. And we now move into inviting the Honorable Emmeline Pierre, Minister for Education, Human Resource Development, Information and Religious Affairs, to give us a few brief comments. Minister Pierre?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I am not at the best location, still on the move, trying to end the day, but I don't want to miss this opportunity to make a few brief comments as part of this very important activity. So permit me to recognize, I don't have the particular list, but permit me to recognize Bishop Clyde Harvey and all of the members of the clergy that are present online and otherwise. I want to also especially recognize your guest speaker this evening, your distinguished guest speaker, Principal of the Presentation Brothers College, Brother Dominic Jeremiah, and all of the staff members, students, parents, and well-wishers of the institution. Ladies and gentlemen, members of the organizing committee, good evening to you. It is indeed a pleasure for me to have this opportunity, as indicated, to share a few words briefly at the start of such an important conversation. And I call it a conversation because I do hope that this is something that is going to transcend beyond just this couple hours that you have for presentation and discussion, I hope, but that it will be a conversation that will continue. I want to also use the opportunity to commend and to recognize the leadership of the Presentation Brothers College for the contribution that you're making to the continued development of the institution and the role that the institution is playing to the development of our society. I also must commend the organizing committee for the 70th anniversary for what I consider to be an excellent job in terms of the diversity of activities and the quality of activities that I've seen in terms of your recognition of this period. I want to just make this point, referencing the book of Proverbs when it says that we ought to train up a child in the way that he should go, so that when he's old or she's old, he would not depart from it. And I believe that we all as Christians believe that this is not just speaking about morals and values, but of course, directly speaking to spiritual intervention, spiritual food that every child ought to receive. Unfortunately, I always say this, there are children who come from homes where they are not even encouraged or taught how to pray. And that is why I share a very strong view that the role of church is extremely significant as it relates to supporting our children to be nourished spiritually. I always remember attending secondary school, Anglican secondary school, and during those times, the church that you belong to, your religion, would have a representative come to the school. And so the Catholics would go one way, the Anglicans would go one way, and otherwise. And I believe that we must continue to recognize the importance of spiritual food in the growth of any child, and particularly during the formative years. And so I have said it publicly, and I continue to say this, having had the foundation as a child, as coming from a Catholic school, Catholic church, I've always said publicly, and I will forever say this, that the foundation that I received, I believe, has been extremely critical in my growth as a human being, as an adult. And so I want to continue to encourage the church, continue to encourage the school, to ensure that students who access the institution, regardless of their faith or their belief, have that experience spiritually that will complement all of the other things, academic and otherwise, because I am of the firm view that without that, a child is not complete. And so I want to compliment the church again, and to say to all of those involved in the promotion of Catholic education that this is extremely important, and I encourage you to continue to do so. Again, I want to extend my very best wishes to all of those who are involved in the celebration and organizing of the celebrations to mark the 75th year of the Presentation Brothers College, and to recognize those who have gone before and made very valid contribution, and the significant role that those contributions would have played in national development. So again, my endorsement, my support, and my best wishes to the Catholic Church and Presentation Brothers College in all of its efforts to groom and to grow and to nourish our children to contribute to our society. Thank you so much, and best wishes.
Thank you, Minister. We thank you kindly for those remarks and encouragement. We particularly welcome the fact that we know we need to have a balance when we're educating our children, and that spiritual aspect of giving our children an access to it and what it means to the character is vitally important, and we thank you for those words of encouragement. We now move the program along, and we're getting ready now to invite Sister Maureen Alexander, the Provincial Superior of the Sisters of St. Joseph of Cluny, and the former principal of the St. Joseph Convent, St. George. Sister Maureen, we now invite you to make your remarks.
Good evening to all, and happy 75th anniversary of Blessed Edmund Rice, founder of the Presentation Brothers. I think it's a wonderful gesture to use this occasion to honor Brother Lennard, who is well known, not only to those who testify to the positive impact he has had on their lives at the college, but his input in the education system in Grenada, and his role that he and the brothers, and we have, of course, Brother Dennis and Roberts, who I think is on this forum, the formation of leadership that we see in every sphere, giving service in Grenada towards nation building, and not only Grenada, extensively worldwide. You will find a college boy. Some of us who attended St. Joseph's Convent knew Brother Lennard. We even knew his nickname, but which I would not volunteer on this forum. I remember Friday nights, for example, the combo band, my brother Benny and John McEwen and others. There was always a connection between our schools, and this has been fostered through the years with all of the brothers who served so faithfully in this mission of education in Grenada. I've been asked to share about 5 minutes on the Catholic education and its importance in the education system in Grenada and the development of people. Well, to begin with, I'm a product of Catholic education. And Catholic education we see as a movement that is motivated by a power to serve and to claim what is our own, our land, our heritage, and to have a sense of rootedness. Catholic education is foundational, and we embrace it fully, the holistic aspect of Catholic education. The minister spoke about the spiritual part, but in all the development, all parts of development, because we are called, it's a call to service through love of God's people, wherever we are sent, and to have that broad vision of a world that is created by God and created for us to work and to live in harmony. And that is our purpose, our mission. So wherever we are sent, wherever we are called, we see it as an assignment, all of us who work in the field of education. I wouldn't be here where I am today if it was not for that foundation. That foundation begins in family, the Catholic home, my village, my school, church. Notice I'm saying this with one breath. There was no separation. It was a harmonious whole, shared power existing among the forces that were responsible for the formation of citizens. And parents, critical role in formation because they are the first educators. So Catholic education was for a long time guided by this movement between generations, and still ought to be. There was a clear understanding that education was never the action of a single person or institution. Everyone, home, school, church, were a microcosm of society. Work and progress were inextricably bound and must be shared together by family, school, church, and association of various types in church and society. And we know all those associations that we had, 4-H club, whatever it is, scouts, guides, cultural, civil, and religious life and society was part, they were all part of the holistic development that Catholic education fostered and nourished. It was an avenue for economic, cultural, and moral development. So knowing our history and the evolution of our history of Catholic education in Grenada is important because Catholic education, because history, in fact, is always instructive and points to a direction, a pathway to progress. The history of Catholic education in Grenada cannot be fully understood without an understanding of the dire situation and the appreciation of what the Negroes experienced in the post-emancipation period. Today, our Holy Father talks about cry of the poor and the cry of the earth. The cry of the poor in the poor post-emancipation period was heard. And that is how religious organizations came in, because we are all on a journey, and a faith journey rooted in God. So we listen to the cries and we hear it. And missionaries came from all parts of the world, from Ireland, and they served, they came. That is how St. Joseph's Convent came in, our sisters of St. Joseph of Cluny, the brothers. I remember when we had the Anglican sisters who came in, and they came in because they listened and they heard a cry, because God is speaking through people. If we understand the journey that we are all called to make, a movement that connects us with one another, and to understand that when God calls, we move. And so that cry was heard. And it was the cry of the poor people. they had, post-slavery, slavery still there, and they wanted to experience a sense of dignity, and so for their children. So they worked hard. I remember a lot of people in travel, all of these things, they worked so that the children could get an education. So the focus was on a formation for authentic human community in this post-emancipation period. If money was the motivation for Catholic education for the Catholic Church, it would not have established the number of primary schools within a short period in the history of Grenada. And the total absence of financial support, because the focus was on village education, basic education for equipment for self-worth and dignity and the restoration of life. And it is from this backdrop that we begin to see and appreciate the incredible role that the Catholic Church, together with other religious organizations through the ages, played in establishing a school system and the expansion of education from primary school to secondary school. So Catholic education focuses on challenges now to continue integral development of the people of Grenada, the spiritual development in all of our dimensions, the dimensions of the person. We need to forge ahead because it is education for liberation and for peace that is so needed in our communities, in our world, in our homes. We have a mandate for this mission, and we cannot not listen to that cry that is outside there that continues. And so we thank God for the sisters, for the brothers, and all those who continue to collaborate in the mission of education. I'm talking about all stakeholders, Ministry of Education, families, parents, they are the first educators. We are doing a work of service for them, but they must be involved. They have to participate in this venture. And for all of us who commit to this great challenge, wherever we are, because education for building of community, building of life, building of the society. And we see it everywhere. We see people everywhere taking their role. All of us gathered here together would have had, most of us, a Catholic education. And that is why we are here, because we have committed our lives to service. So I thank God for this opportunity and for all of us who continue this mission that is entrusted to us by God. A movement and a journey. And now we're talking about the synodal journey to listen to what God is saying to us and to understand that we cannot turn our backs on this movement. So God bless you all, and thank you again for being here.
Thank you, Sister Alexander, for those words and giving us a context of the history and the impact that our schools under the Catholic system would have made in Grenada and throughout the Caribbean, because we have presentation colleges in Trinidad and up the islands as well. So it was a holistic involvement of the brothers from Ireland as well as the sisters. And I have very fond memories being a past student of presentation of the close relationship that existed between the St. Joseph Convent girls and the presentation boys and what that represented. I also had fond memories of being a student of Brother Lennard, Brother Ligori, and Brother Anthony. In those days, we used to call him Shorty as his nickname. I won't mention Brother Lennard's nickname. We leave that alone. But those were days that were fun memories and molded us as young men. Then we didn't know what was coming, but molded us to whom we have become now as leaders in our societies, in our various communities and islands throughout our region. So, Sister, we thank you very much for those words and putting it into context for us, of course. As Sister mentioned, one of the key founders of this is Blessed Edmund Rice, and we now have a presentation recording done by Brother Robert Fanovich, which we are going to play now for our viewers to listen.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Your Excellency, Dame Cecile Lagrenard, Governor General of Grenada, Honorable Emmeline Pear, Minister for Education, Resource Development, Information and Religious Affairs. Your Lordship, Bishop Clyde Martin Harvey, Bishop of the Diocese of St. George's, Your Excellency Justice Anthony Carmona, featured speaker, former President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, Sister Maureen Alexander, Provincial Superior of the Sisters of St. Joseph of Cluny, and former Principal of St. Joseph's Convent, Brother Dennis Clavas and other presentation brothers, Father Emmanuel Kufre, Cathedral Administrator, other members of the clergy and religious sisters, Mr. Dominic Jeremiah, Principal of PBC, Mr. Adrian Francis, Chairman of the 75th Anniversary Committee, members of the 75th Anniversary Committee and subcommittees, members of the Presentation Brothers College community, staff, students, and associates, specially invited guests, viewers on the various platforms, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me great pleasure this evening to join you via Zoom to the Brother Lennard Denehey Memorial Lecture. And I am going to share with you something on the life of our founder, Blessed Edmund Rice. And I noticed that the theme for the lecture has to do with educating for service. And that is exactly what our founder was all about. Service, service of love, rooted in Christ and doing good for others. So without further ado, I will just go into the PowerPoint presentation on our founder, Blessed Edmund Rice. Blessed Edmund Rice, the founder of the Presentation Brothers. Who was he? Let's get into that story, his story, our story. Edmund was born in 1762 in Ireland. His life continues to inspire thousands around the world. He was born at a time of great injustices to the Catholic Irish. Under British rule, the harsh penal laws which the British enacted held the Catholic in poverty and ignorance. Firstly, priests were banned from saying Mass. Higher education was forbidden for Catholics. Catholics couldn't own large tracts of land. All of these laws kept the Catholics, or was meant to keep the Catholics, poor and ignorant. And in that way, they could control them. It is no surprise then that Ireland has opened its doors and hearts to thousands of Ukrainian refugees fleeing the tyranny and invasion of Putin's war. Because the Irish suffered so much under British rule, they understand and can empathize with the Ukrainians who are flooding into the country. In 1786, Edmund, now a successful and very wealthy businessman, married Mary Elliot at the age of 24. But all was not to be well. In 3 years into the marriage, Mary, who was pregnant at the time, suffered a tragic accident. She gave birth to a very frail baby, and Mary died shortly after. Overwhelmed with grief, it took Edmund 13 years before he could turn his grief into an opportunity to do good. In 1802, Edmund, after a much thought and reflection and advice from his friends, started a school in Waterford, Ireland, for poor boys. He renovated some stables, and he began this night school for street kids, while still carrying on his business activities by day. Edmund and his supporters fed, clothed, and taught the poor boys in Waterford. He had a bakery, and he baked fresh bread for them daily, and he had a tailor shop to make clothes for them. On August the 15th, 1808, Edmund and his companions made their first vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. And all presentation brothers to this day continue to take the same three vows. This community expanded to England, North America, South America, Africa, and the West Indies. They arrived in the West Indies in 1946 and started the first schools in Grenada and St. Lucia in 1947. We then went on to Trinidad in 1948 and Barbados in 1958. Edmund took his inspiration from the presentation of Mary in the temple. Now, tradition has it that Mary's parents, Joachim and Anne, were childless, and God granted them the gift of a baby girl who they named Mary. In thanksgiving to God, they dedicated her to God. Mary, in turn, presented herself to God in service and love. Notice later on in life, Mary said, "Let it be done unto me according to thy word," when the angel Gabriel greeted her. Here we see one of our schools in Ghana. It is interesting to note that the needs are changing in our time, and brothers are responding to those changing needs. The earth is dying and crying out for our help. Pollution, climate change, industrialization, the extinction of so many species, and many of our brothers are involved in caring for the earth and the environment. Another example of changing needs today is an organization called ERI, or Edmund Rice International, based in Geneva, Switzerland. This organization is committed to working for children and young people who are marginalized because of poverty, lack of access to education, legal status, and so on. Giving back to the school is what we are all about. I like this photo. This is the one year when we won the SGU Knowledge Bowl. We came first, and our students worked day and night preparing for the debate, aided by the teachers who also sacrificed. And that is what we're all about, service and sacrifice, just like Mary and our founder, Blessed Edmund Rice, asking nothing in return. And what do you think was their reward? The reward of these young men who won for the school the trophy for the SGU Knowledge Bowl. Just the satisfaction of knowing that they did their best, and it really was for love of their school. We were challenged in 2017 at our chapter to combat the antithesis of Christian manliness we are seeing in global, egoistic, depraved, and brutal leaders. This is what we're all about. Manhood and manliness is not about showing how powerful you are or how many people you can kill or fighting wars. It is about compassion. Here we see Pope Francis comforting a man with a dreaded skin disease. And so we are pilgrim brothers with a compassionate Christ in an evolving world. That is what we are about. And that is the message we want to pass on to all our students. Pray for us as we presentation brothers journey into the future. Pray for our new communities in Grenada and St. Lucia as we face a future that is fraught with wars, a pandemic that is here to stay, and an earth that is crying out for our help. Please enjoy the rest of the evening. God bless you all. I hope, brothers and sisters, that you found the presentation on Blessed Edmund Rice interesting. He left us a legacy of service, of love, of compassion, of caring for the less fortunate, for the vulnerable in our society. And that is the message that he left us, and the message that we would like and pray that all our students would leave the halls of Presentation Brothers College with. So God bless you all, and enjoy the rest of the evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Fanovich, for that enlightening history of our institution and how it came about, and how Blessed Edmund Rice, of course, contributed to all that we have today and the characters that we have today that have passed through the Presentation Brothers colleges in the various islands. As you know, ladies and gentlemen, we have a very celebrated choir called the Presentation Brothers Choir, who have made their mark in tunes and songs that they have done and performed region-wide and in Grenada as well. So we now take a musical interlude, and we invite our choir to do a presentation for a few minutes, and then we move ahead with the program.
With me, I want Jesus to walk with me. I want Jesus to walk with me while I'm on this pilgrim journey. I want Jesus to walk with me. Walk with me, with me. I've been walking with my face turned to the sun, weight on my shoulders, a bullet in my gun. I got ice in the back of my head, just in case I have to run. I do what I can when I can, all I can for my people. As the clouds roll back and the stars fill the night, that's when I'm gonna stand up, take my people with me. Together we are going to a brand new home, far across the river. Can you hear freedom calling, calling me to answer? Gonna keep on keeping on. I can feel it in my bones. Early in the morning, before the sun begins to shine, we're gonna start moving towards that separating line. Wading through muddy waters, you're not made up mind. I don't mind if I lose any blood on my take my people with me. Together we are going to a brand new home. Far across the river, can you hear freedom calling? Calling me to answer, gonna keep on keeping on. I'm gonna stand up, take my people with me. Together we are going to a brand new home. Far across the river, can you hear freedom calling? Calling me to answer, gonna keep on keeping on. I can feel it in my bones. I go to prepare a place for you. I go to prepare a place for you. I go to prepare a place for you. I go to prepare a place for you.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Of course, I'm sure you would have enjoyed that musical interlude by our choir and the quality of the rendition. You know, we have very talented young men, and long ago you would think that our young boys couldn't sing as richly as they have done. So we hope you enjoyed that. We now move along in the program and get into our feature presentation this evening. And we're now going to invite Mr. Dwight Marcus Sampson to introduce our feature speaker, His Excellency Justice Anthony Carmona, former President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. Mr. Sampson?
Yes, good evening. I wish to observe the protocol that has been established. Before I do the introduction for His Excellency Carmona, I wish to register my condolences to my former schoolmate at the college, an attorney at law, Delanie Edwards, his wife, and his siblings on the passing of their mom, attorney at law, Mrs. Cecilia Klein Edwards, QC. Justice Anthony T.A. Carmona, SC, ORTT. His Excellency Justice Anthony T.A. Carmona was the 5th President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago and a retired judge. Anthony Thomas Aquinas Carmona, SC, ORTT, was born on the 7th March 1953. Previously to the presidency, Carmona was a High Court judge at the Supreme Court of Trinidad and Tobago, and he also served as a judge of the International Criminal Court from 2012 to 2013. Anthony Carmona was born in Fisba, I hope I have that right, in South Trinidad, the eldest of 6 children of Dennis, Stefan, and Barbara Carmona. Anthony is married and is the proud father of 2 children. He graduated from the Santa Flora Government School and the Presentation College, San Fernando. He then attended University of the West Indies, UWI, where he attained a Bachelor of Art degree in English and Political Science, Mona, Jamaica, and a Bachelor of Law, Cayville, Barbados. He taught language and linguistics at UWI from 1981 to 1983. He later returned to UWI to be a senior tutor in politics in the Department of Government for approximately 4 years. Mr. Carmona has served as a prosecutor at both the national and international levels for some 21 years. He served at the office of the Director of Public Prosecutor from 1983 to 2000, during which time he obtained the post of Assistant Director of Public Prosecution, the Deputy Director of the Public Prosecution, and also served as Acting Director of Public Prosecution from 2001 to 2004. He held the post of Appeal Counsel in the Office of the Prosecutor at the International Criminal Tribunal and the International Criminal Tribunal in Rwanda. In this capacity, he has successfully prosecuted appeals of persons convicted of crimes within the justice of the tribunal, namely generals, commanders, soldiers, and politicians. In 2004, he was appointed High Court Judge in the Supreme Court of Trinidad and Tobago, and on 12 December 2001, he was elected as a judge of the International Criminal Court. On March 18, 2013, Justice Carmona took the oath of office as the 5th President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. Colleagues, it's a tremendous honor for me to present His Excellency Justice Anthony Thomas Aquinas Carmona to present our keynote presentation this evening. Justice Carmona.
Yeah, thank you very much. Honorable Minister of Education of Grenada, Bishop Clyde Harvey, pastoral giant in the Caribbean region, a man strong in the faith and who has done considerable work in Trinidad, and who we like to think that we have loaned him to Grenada. Mr. Jeremiah, the principal of Presentation College in Grenada. Sister Maureen Alexander, someone, of course, who, based on what I've heard, I have instantly admired, because, of course, I'm very much accurate with what you all have done as nuns in this Caribbean region, because, of course, my aunt, Sister Antoinette Dickey, was former Mother Superior of the Carmelite Sisters. And I also have a cousin, Sister Antoinette Fahey, who is in charge of the Lady Huchai home in Vista Bella. I would like to also, in fact, acknowledge Aaron for the excellent job he has done in outlining the concerns of the young people of Grenada in the context of the small presentation that he did. I would also like to thank the chairman of the anniversary committee for an excellent job, appreciating that there will always be logistics problems, and that so far, in fact, he has done an excellent job. On this day, and of course, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, priests, nuns, teachers, the people of Grenada. And of course, you all are very close to us, because of course I come from an area called Faizabad, where the majority of persons who migrated from Grenada reside, who came to Trinidad in the 20s, 30s, and 40s. And of course, you all, in fact, will be acquainted with Buzz Uriah Butler, who, in fact, is of Grenadian stock, and who created real transformation in Trinidad and Tobago, starting in the district of Faizabad. And because of him, I am proud to say that I am from a village of Faizabad, which is, in fact, the seat of revolutionary transformation in Trinidad and Tobago. And of course, you know, we cannot forget the magic of Sparrow and Paul Keynes Douglas. So Grenada has been good to us in Trinidad and Tobago. On this day, the feast day of Blessed Edmund Rice, the founder of the Presentation Brothers, and the 75th anniversary of Presentation College Grenada, we luxuriate in a defining moment of revolutionary spiritual vision and genuine social and educational transformation. Presentation College is a Christian community of students, staff, parents, alumni, and patrons working together to encourage excellence, responsibility, integrity, initiative, and respect. The teachings of the college are based on Catholic Christian philosophy of education with the motto, virtue and knowledge. For decades, presentation brothers have produced astute, principled, distinguished, and competent men around the region who have served their respective territories with distinction and honor. We must also pay homage to Brother Lennard Denehey and his unforgettable legacy and stewardship in shaping men of caliber in Grenada. Yes, are you hearing me? Hello? We broke off just a second ago.
You're back, so go ahead, sir.
Yes, okay, thank you very much. We must pay homage to Brother Lennard Denehey and his unforgettable legacy and stewardship in shaping men of caliber, men and women of caliber in Grenada. The Presentation Brothers arrived in Grenada in 1946 against the backdrop of the ravages of World War II. And at the behest of Archbishop Finbarayan, the Archbishop of Port of Spain, established the first Catholic male secondary school. Before that, of course, the first and only Catholic female secondary school had already been established by the Sisters of St. Joseph of Cluny in 1870, providing holistic education for the young ladies in Grenada. The founding brothers, within a short time, they triggered remarkable response and prominence by way of excellence in the education landscape of Grenada, producing quality young men who would go on to make significant contributions to the development of Grenada. And of course, not only Grenada, but Trinidad and Tobago. The goal of Catholic education and what makes Catholic education good news is that it results in the development of the whole person. In pursuing this integral and holistic formation, the aim is to prepare our students for life, both in this life and the life to come. We Catholics are convinced that all human values find their fulfillment and unity in Christ. It is in Jesus Christ that the fullness of truth concerning man is to be found. A solid Catholic education is not meant to prepare you to make a good living, to do well. A Catholic education is to help you to learn the ways of being good and doing good and living well, not to the detriment of others, and particularly to find life's purpose through unadulterated service. Another aspect of Catholic education is the focus on fruitfulness. There's a difference between our successes and the actual good we bring to society. We should always feel proud about our legitimate achievements. But as Father Henri Neuvin has often reminded us, that achievement is not the same as fruitfulness. Our achievements are basically the things we have accomplished. On the other hand, fruitfulness is the positive impact such achievements have on others. We may distinguish ourselves by our achievements, but fruitfulness brings blessings into the lives of other people. As Father Nouwen, theologian extraordinaire, stated, and I quote, "In our woundedness, we can become sources of life for others," end of quote. He saw his personal demons and hurts as angels in disguise. And to confront life affirmatively, he stated that we must practice the discipline of gratitude. The imperative given to the church is the holistic development of each student for responsible citizenship, motivated by the spirit of the gospel and modeled on the example of Jesus Christ. It is passing strange how, in fact, we haven't heard enough of the AEC pastoral letter on Catholic education in the territories of the Antilles Episcopal Conference of the 14th of April 2011, which cited the crises faced by Catholic education. And I quote, "They confirm that we have a crisis of values which, in highly developed societies, assumes the form often exalted by the media of subjectivism, moral relativism, and nihilism. The extreme pluralism pervading contemporary society leads to behavior patterns which are at times so opposed to one another as to undermine any idea of community identity. Rapid structural changes, profound technical innovations, and the globalization of the economy affect human life more and more throughout the world, rather than prospects of development for all. We witness a widening of the gap between rich and poor and its deleterious effects." End of quote. The Catholic social teaching principle of solidarity is about recognizing others selflessly as our brothers and sisters and actively engage in working for the common good of all. In our connected humanity, we are invited to build relationships, to understand what life is like for others who are different from us, and particularly those with special needs and limitations. Integral to the mission of a Catholic Church system is the responsibility of Catholic school educators to call upon one another and their students to live with integrity, respect for human dignity, compassion, courage, and social responsibility. That such are achievable through service and not raw power. Transforming personal prejudices and systemic discrimination into just and peaceful relationships and social structures create a culture of respect, caring, and harmony. This is achieved through the expression of educational goals that infuse Judeo-Christian values of justice and peace and principles of Catholic social teaching into the spiritual, social, and academic dimensions of the school system. An environment in which human life is protected and deemed sacrosanct. Economic justice is promoted and maintained, and non-violence is valued. All provide students with a moral framework for everyday action, everyday service, and everyday decency. I do recall, upon entering Presentation College at age 11, coming across my principal at the time, an Irishman, Brother Jerome Kelly, a principal of prominence and a former amateur boxer. And we all heard about his reputation as a stickler disciplinarian, but with a big, broad smile. And I remember him telling us new students that he knew we were daddy's pet and mommy's joy, but we would not be treated as such. That the training that we received here will set us right for the challenges that may be encountered in our daily lives in and out of school. I do recall this bulldog-looking Irish presentation brother with a rock-solid jaw, bellowing with pride as he stated, Presentation College San Fernando does not create yes men to add to the yes men in our society. He continued, at Presentation College, men are not trained to say yes in the face of wrong or when wrong is being done, but rather to say yes when called upon to do what is right, what is needed, what is required, and what is just. That defining message stayed with me, etched in the mind of this country boy from the small oil town of Faizabad. That admonition staying with me for years, honing and shaping my understanding of how one must function in a society, more so now, a society grown weary by its adherence to the negatives of westernization and the profligate dysfunction in its many forms that now exist in our societies. Perhaps the greatest existential threat being the minefield called social media. In the Catholic school system, we had and still have committed inspirational teachers in the various schools around the region, teachers grounded in the Socratic tradition of being the sage, a learned man with unflinching agenda to make the Catholic student a better person rather than a greater one. Catholic teaching, I have found, is grounded in the desire and a philosophy that the student would not only reach the personal intellectual heights of the teacher, but go beyond them. I do recall at Presentation College San Fernando, an atmosphere of dedicated teachers who never wilted under the weight of any form of indiscipline, regardless of its source, be it from delinquent students, delinquent parents, or imposing officials from the Ministry of Education. We had the ever-present guidance of Presentation College brothers to keep us on that straight and narrow path. It is not by happenstance that in Trinidad, Presentation College San Fernando has produced 2 prime ministers and a president, together with an array of respected, constructive, and competent professionals. It is no different with Presentation College Grenada. How could we forget the perennial, visionary, and inspirational Maurice Bishop, George Brizan, and Dr. Keith Mitchell, the present Prime Minister, who continues to do human service, and who at times, when I hear him speak, I often remember teaching us, telling us, giving us the moral compass to lead. It is not by happenstance that these things have happened. At Catholic schools, teachers always believed and demanded that religion, and certainly spirituality, must be at the core of any educational process of the rounded student. I personally have been the brunt of cynicism, sarcasm, and even mild derision whenever I publicly, as president, invoke the power of God and the power of prayer. But as a man steeped in Christian doctrine, I will continue to bear the buffets, the slings and arrows, and the blows of non-believers, living in the boundless hope. Because you know what? Saul became Paul. My Catholic teaching continued to make me believe in the transformation of men and women who are weak, that they will become strong, that the cynics will become optimistic, that the non-believers will become a believer in something spiritually worthwhile. Our unabiding faith remains in a Creator whose divine intervention propels our success and our triumphs. We walk along the pathways of life knowing that spiritual accountability awaits us all. Human transformation is both progressive and exponential and real. And people, we must recognize, can change for the better. I know, however, that Saul became Paul, as I mentioned. The problem I always face It's a dilemma of sort. I don't know how much of Saul remains in Paul. We must not forget the efficacy of primary school education, where what is taught is service to humanity, and that is synonymous with service to God. I have found, in fact, in primary schools that service is a core function of Christian education. In passing, I wish to de-emphasize rather, this concept that is often bandied about as if it is unattainable, even utopic for other schools. This buzzword, the prestige school. But let me warn you, one common denominator of the so-called prestige school is a deep sense and belief in God and godliness, in the school body politic, spirituality, practice morality, supportive parenting, with unified service and homage to the Almighty. Encourage, even instill this in every school, and one would be amazed by the genuine transformation that will come with that spirituality, that religion, and that deep-seated morality that we find in denominational schools. Education and the pursuit of knowledge, buttressed by a deep sense of spirituality and religion, have always been an important philosophical matrix of Catholicism. There's no denying, however, that historically, much wrong has been committed under the guise of saving souls. The first peoples of the world were decimated, suffering under the yoke of genocide, colonialism, slavery, and religion. And the church unwittingly, in diverse ways, supported this regime of political and institutional subjugation. Slavery was criticized by the church. And it is an affront to the teachings of Jesus Christ, yet it was accepted as part of the order of things and the status quo. Correspondingly, we cannot forget the militancy of those men and women of cloth who concerned about the dignity and importance of the human condition, sacrificed their lives advocating social reform and transformation in the face of blatant violation of fundamental human and political rights. Catholic militancy in education and in other areas have played a major role in social transformation in the Americas, Africa, and Asia. We cannot forget the sheer spiritual magnificence of Mother Teresa, actualized in the gutter streets of Calcutta, helping the poor, the impoverished, and the disadvantaged, or the sight and circumstance of Archbishop Romero, assassinated, gunned down on the altar of redemption as he held mass amidst threats in the face of his public stated opposition to the politically engineered slaughter and suppression of the citizens of El Salvador. I will not engage in a historical treatise of the flotsam and jetsam of religious militancy and Catholicism, for history is replete with formidable examples of those who tried, and even today continue trying, to make this world of ours a better and greater place. Education is the key that opens up not some doors, but all doors. Moral and religion-based education instills a sense of purpose, adds value to a part soul, nurturing ambition and progressive goals, cementing hopes, and inspiring and creating vision of what is possible with industry and hard work. Like hundreds of thousands of presentation students, and students who have in fact been trained in an environment of Christianity, I can attest to this. And we have eternally benefit from an education system grounded in the fundamentals of Catholicism under the guiding hand and stewardship of the Presentation Brothers. There is, however, a march on full throttle in favor of secularism, hedonism, and materialism, where the law of the jungle is being given prominence and legitimacy, with the dismantling of globalization and multilateralism in favor of skewed nationalism and politically induced distorted patriotism. Love of country must never be subsumed by love of political party, patronage, allegiance, and sycophancy. And this we must teach our students. The inner voice of conscience must be relied upon, for it is a bedrock that supports a person's sense of morality, ethics, and integrity. A Catholic education supports the voice of conscience. That is why, as patron of FOPAL, an international organization, I was part of that vanguard with them that advocated the 5th of April to be the Day of Conscience. And we finally got through with it because we felt that there was a need for a Day of Conscience to be invoked every single day of the year by political leaders and by leaders in our societies. As I stated, a Catholic education, a Christian education supports the voice of conscience. Perceptively, defending patent wrongs seem to be in vogue because the status quo of wrongdoings benefit the few to the detriment of the many. And this debilitating environment of wrongdoing is protected by many at all and any cost. The pursuit of the common good buckles in the face of executive and institutional wrongdoing. We must therefore create soldiers of righteousness by way of Christian values to do the right thing because it is the right thing to do. We must always muster the courage to defend and protect what is good and upstanding. That is what a Christian spirituality must do, whether it be in the safe and private confines of our homes, in the midst of our domesticity, or in the corridors of power. We live in a world where governance structures and constitutions founded on exemplary moral principles and great philosophies are plagued by corruption and a lack of transparency, accountability, and integrity. The moral fiber in modern-day governments has been made threadbare, where politicians feel that they are owed more than they are paid, that somehow they have a right to tinker and put their hands in the cookie jar of the nation-state's coffers. The world is in dire need of a value-based society grounded in morality and ethics. Conscience is not the enemy within. It represents the moral authority that resides in us all to do right to all manner of persons. In that regard, we Christians, we who have been taught the right way, we must in fact be strong, and we must have the moral responsibility to help and sustain the weak. We have seen the corruption and pollution of public morals in our leaders, ably supported by their political parties and supporters. Our children in the schools must stem that tide. We rationalize wrongdoing and ethical shortcuts on the altar of political pragmatism and the need for expedition. When moral governance, steeped in spiritual values, is about checks and balances that integrity, transparency, and accountability fortify. Doing the right thing because it's the right thing to do has been my personal mantra. What I developed at Presentation College, San Fernando. And I have lived by and shared that with thousands of school children, nationally and internationally, who physically came to my office. That mantra is not subject to negotiation, barter, nor has it a price. Doing the right thing must be practiced and encouraged always, whether behind closed doors, in cloistered rooms, even in the midst of private and confidential discussions and negotiations. As I've stated, that moral mandate must neither be the moral mandate of doing the right thing must neither be selective, occasional, or transient. In a world of morality, ethics, and integrity, invoking confidentiality, and this seems to be deployed today, invoking confidentiality cannot and must not be a mechanism for endorsing and protecting what is wrong, improper, and even illegal. Additionally, one cannot and must not refer and allude to the wrongs of the past to justify, excuse, and rationalize the wrongs of the present. We live in an era of knowledge and enlightenment. And as many have stated, we must not play smart with foolishness. Don't lie. Don't steal. Don't betray the people. One world leader stated, and that is the roadmap to genuine moral governance. And that is steeped in the edits, in the tenets of Christianity. Verbalizing the right sentiments don't necessarily mean that they will bear fruit. There must be an enabling environment that facilitates and nurtures goodness, emotional intelligence, fairness, and equality of treatment in all governance models. And as I've stated time and time again, the solutions that we seek to the problems of the world are to be found in the classrooms of the world. Catholic teaching propel this undying message. The golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. It has its efficacy, but it also has its drawbacks and limitations. Doing good to others should not be based on reciprocity. That you do good so that good will come your way in the future. Morality and ethics do not work that way. Doing good and being good should not be based on conditions and conditionalities. As a moral code, I have advocated the platinum rule. I spoke to thousands of students in India and in Trinidad and Tobago about the platinum rule. And it is simple. Do good and be good. If good comes your way, fine. If not, it matters not. For doing good has never been based on contingencies and what awaits you favorably in the future. In teaching about Jesus Christ, we must adhere without reservation to ensuring that protecting Mother Earth becomes a core feature of Catholic teaching and Catholic ministry. There is a moral dimension to climate change that needs to be both recognized and emphasized. We have a moral responsibility, each and every one of us, to protect Mother Earth for the benefit of successive generations. We cannot and must not deny our moral and ethical responsibility to safeguard the very territorial integrity of small island development states. And we all know what needs to be done with regard to zero carbon emissions. And call to account we must those nation states that engage in patronizing non-realistic timelines for zero carbon emission in this era of climate emergency. Finally, Catholic education has played a pivotal role in the development of Grenada. The independence of the denominational schools has been key to fostering the culture that presentation in Grenada now enjoys and has enjoyed for the last 75 years. Collaboration with the state should continue to be the modus operandi and not confrontational and perceived usurpation by the state. I have always stated, secularism has its place in the education system. But raw secularism is not the way to affirmative, transformative to a transformative education system. The ethos of the Catholic Church is such that the education offered must take into account that all-round and holistic development of its charges, while at the same time offering quality education. It is therefore of paramount importance that school curriculum, school operation, and activities, in fact, all that takes place should support the building, yes, the building of a consciousness of the individual's social responsibility. This is a strong tenet of the Catholic faith, as seen in the church teachings on social justice, based on the gospel values. In our teaching, in our Catholic teaching, in our Christian teaching, we must always demand and always invoke a disciple's tongue and a disciple's action. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Excellency Justice Anthony Carmona. You know, listening to your speech and what you carried so many fundamental issues of development for young men and by extension our society that I will hate to want to repeat some of them because I may do them injustice. So I'm going to encourage all of us who are on this platform and listen to this speech, let you know that this speech and this program is recorded and you can go back and take a listen to Justice Anthony Carmona and some of the areas that he pointed out that was so interesting and so critical. One that rang and sat with me was the whole issue of when he entered presentation, he was told quite clearly that we are not going to be yes men. We are to be young men drilled and brought up in the academics, but to challenge things that come our way, whether it's academically or otherwise. And I certainly learned from that. And today I am a person that will challenge things that come to me, all from our background and education in the presentation college life. We are now going to entertain some questions. It's going to be managed by Ms. Simone Blackett for Justice Anthony Carmona. So we'd like you to stay on a little longer and entertain any questions we may have on the site that maybe have been posed by our listeners on the platforms. Ms. Blackett? Is Ms. Blackett with us?
Yes, sorry, my mic was muted. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, good evening.
All right. Okay, a question here posed is can the role of Catholic education be effective in this mission without the involvement of the role of the other denominations in the Grenadian society? I'll repeat. Can the role of Catholic education be effective in this mission without the involvement of the role of the other denominations in the Grenadian society?
I believe in the community of religion. I believe that all religions, in fact, have common indices and common denominators in the context of their responsibility to their fellow men. So I do not see it, in fact, as any kind of threat that we engage all religions. Because when you look, for example, at all the great books, the Bible, the Quran, the Bhagavad Gita, you find, for example, there's a common thread of humanity. There is, in fact, a message that resonates with every single person, regardless of his religion. And I don't think we should see each other as a threat. Because I recall, for example, if I may recall something that was remarkable and someone who, in fact, is a very strong Muslim. I remember, in fact, this afternoon, meeting a judge, colleague of mine, Justice Zainul Hussain. And he told me, he grew up in Ekel village in Williamsville, way down in the country. He said there was one school, one primary school that they all went to. And some of those who went to that school ended up being great luminaries of the Caribbean region. And he said it was an Anglican school. He said, and we would go to the mosque, And after we finished going to the mosque, we in fact would go to the Anglican primary school and we would listen to instructions. And he says, in fact, we had 1 feet in the mosque and 1 feet in the Anglican school. And he says, you know, what it did for us, it made us more rounded. It made us, in fact, more aware of each other, of the sensitivities, the sensibilities. And more important of all, he told me, it made us realize that we are all one.
That's right.
Sitting at the table of humanity. So I don't feel, for example, that Catholic education will be compromised by us interfacing and collaborating with other religions. I think, in fact, we all could learn from each other, you know, from culturally and religiously. Because, of course, there are, as you're quite aware, for example, you know, something which we had in traditional African society was deep respect for the old and the aged. And somehow, in fact, this has withered. But I can tell you one particular religion where it remains steadfast is the Hindu religion, where, in fact, there is still a sense of sacrosanct to the elderly. Now, I'm not saying for one moment it has disappeared among persons of African descent or persons of mixed descent. But I can tell you, in fact, for example, one thing I have observed with great and deep concern is elder abuse taking place in the Caribbean region, elder abuse. And it takes several forms. It takes the form of physical abuse, and it also takes the form of economic abuse, you know. And I feel, for example, we can learn from each other to raise the quintessence of our humanity to levels that we feel comfortable with, you know. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Another question here. In your view, has the Catholic Church done enough in highlighting the successes of the Catholic education in our countries? I repeat, in your view, has the Catholic Church done enough in highlighting the successes of Catholic education in our countries?
Well, I don't know if, in fact, the Catholic Church ought to get into PR, public relations, and have their performers on billboards on the highways. I feel, for example, confident that the Catholic Church, in fact, can exemplify that success by the daily activity of the citizen in his interaction with other persons. Now, don't get me wrong. Excellence must be celebrated. And I feel sometimes, in fact, the Catholic Church can be, at times, be quite muted in their celebrations of excellence. Because the whole idea behind celebrating excellence is to inspire others. It makes no sense, in fact, engaging in excellence in a way that no one knows about it. So I honestly feel, for example, sometimes, you know, Catholic education does not project itself in as formidable manner as it should. But at the same point in time, I don't think, in fact, we should engage in exhibitionist behavior. Because, in fact, we will be running against the tide of the teaching of the Bible and Jesus Christ. Because one thing that we need to bring back in our society in real terms is humility, is compassion, is caring, is, in fact, lifting each other up. And sometimes, in fact, you know, when we celebrate excellence, sometimes it can have the deleterious effect of putting people down, or, in fact, undermining people's self-esteem and self-worth. You know, so of course it must be tempered, and I feel that is the rationale, the raison d'être of the Catholic Church in terms of how it celebrates success. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so very much. President Mona, in an evolving society, be it made positively or negatively, can the traditional Catholic education be sustainable and viable amidst all these societal changes? Do you believe that?
That has been a concern in 1910, 1945, 1990. It is a concern in 2022, and it will be a concern in 2050. But one thing I can tell you is that our education needs to evolve from where it is. There's no denying that, in fact, that we need to determine whether our educational system, as practice, is in fact benefiting the common good of our respective societies. But one thing I can tell you is that I have found, for example, that there are certain values that I developed or I was taught back in the 50s that's still relevant and still has connectivity to what is taking place in the world today. There are fundamental human values that will stand the test of time. Values like the sanctity of human life. The sanctity of human life is something that is being eroded when one looks at the crime situation throughout the Caribbean, and I can speak because I know about it. I live there in Jamaica, and of course, and more so in Trinidad and Tobago. You know, so it is one aspect of Catholic doctrine, the sanctity of human life, that remains relevant, connected, and very important. You know, the values of family life. I don't think, for example, that family life and the love that is generated within the family is something that is subject to negotiation. I don't think so, because we're in 2022. A family life is family life. If parents must behave in a particular way, parents must exude love, they must create an environment of love at home. They must, in fact, help build their children with appropriate values of honesty, integrity, transparency, accountability. All these are values that are relevant today, were just as relevant in 1920 or in 1865, as the case may be. So I am not, don't get me wrong. We have to evolve, you know, we have to engage change. You know, like, for example, a thing which, of course, was a taboo subject, which I think, in fact, ought to be taught, is sexual education in schools. You know, we need, in fact, to holistically teach it in a way that allay the fears of parents and the conservatives in our society. You know, we have to do these things. You know, we have to make children more aware of their responsibilities, you know, by engaging a value system that sometimes they take for granted, you know, and I feel, for example, that you know, our education system is one that it needs revamping, it needs a recalibration, if I may describe it that way, you know, because we cannot be teaching the same subjects in the same way. And this is why, in fact, when I was president, much to the chagrin of the politicians, I, in fact, advocated for a ministry of climate change. I advocated for a ministry of invention, innovation, and science, because I felt, you know, honestly, that we need to, in fact, confront a debacle that awaits us. You know, regardless of all the economic progress we make, if we do not address climate change and put climate change on the front burner, those of you who are very rich and driving the best of cars, you will be driving your Range Rover in years to come in 12 inches of seawater. And these are the things that, in fact, that we need to ensure that our children become advocates. My wife, for example, have always, in fact, when I was president, always advocated the need for the child advocate. And when in fact she spoke about the child advocate, she spoke about the child who becomes the advocate in the home, in the community, in the classroom. And she did so especially in relation to attacking the problem of comorbidities that are prevalent in our societies. That the child can tell mommy and daddy, do not buy this and do not buy that because it is not good for your health, you know. So I feel, for example, the role of the child and in the context of the child advocate is a transformation that we need. And I think, for example, that children need, I have advocated strongly. Of course, in fact, the politicians don't want it. I have advocated strongly during my presidency for a Caribbean youth parliament, where in fact people are elected, where young people are elected and where they meet at least once a year or once every 6 months, where in fact they put forward proposals for advancing the Caribbean region in real terms, and where in fact their suggestions are treated seriously by CARICOM prime ministers when they have their meetings. It must not be a case of a talk shop. It must be that in fact our young people must be listened to. I recall, for example, the cybercrime legislation that came about in Trinidad. It got its momentum from Form 4 children at Naparima Girls High School, a Presbyterian school, who in fact started a project where they got thousands of signatures demanding that in fact the parliament engage the whole issue of cybercrime. And this is why it is so important, because I think, for example, you know, we are engaged too much in recycling plastic bottles in governance. And this is where young people come in. Don't get me wrong, we need institutional memory. But I don't need a 75 or 80-year-old man having a full-time job when in fact, for example, I have a 35 or 40-year-old MBA, PhD, well-written individual who can run the ministry, who can run the department, and then and seek the advice of, in fact, the person with institutional memory twice a week. What I find happening in Trinidad, when I look, for example, at all these committees that are formulated. Look at, for example, the economic committees for the COVID. When you look at that, you have few women and no young people. You have the same old fogies who are there on these committees with the same old vested interests to ensure that the same vested status quo is maintained. Because we need to move on. We need to move on. And our young people, they are bright enough to engage innovation in a way that will sustain us in a more formidable manner than what is obtained right now in the Caribbean region. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Given the critical role that education, Catholic education to be precise, plays in the development of our region, what are some specific steps that governments must take to empower the religious bodies and denominations that run schools?
Well, I think the first thing, for example, that governments of the regions must recognize and come to terms with, that the Catholic Church is not the enemy, that the denominational church is not the enemy. They have a very sincere and very genuine and very profound interest in the betterment of their students. The fact that they engage spirituality is not a misnomer. There is nothing wrong with engaging spirituality in the school. And this is why, in fact, I spoke about the dysfunction of westernization, where, you know, we look at America and, you know, they don't preach religion in some classrooms, in some states. No. It's against the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, the freedom of expression. It's against this and against that. And we follow it blindly. When, for example, as small societies, we have certain cultural mores that we got from Africa, that we got from India, that we got from China, that we got from Syria, that we got, in fact, from Portugal, from England. And we have, in fact, for example, amalgamate all these things in a manner, all in the hope that we would produce an excellent citizen. And I feel, for example, that an educated man without moral consciousness can become a monster. And somehow I feel sometimes the emphasis that the governments in the region want to engage is education, education, and education. When it should be, in fact, for example, building the human personality and the human man in a way that makes him compassionate, makes him, in fact, caring to the disadvantage, to those, in fact, for example, who are less endowed, to persons with disabilities. To give an example of what I'm talking about in terms of, and I feel the Catholic Church can possibly engage it. My wife, Her Excellency, she, in fact, for example, spoke about the Declaration of Port of Spain, where, in fact, Prime Minister Manning was the first world leader to bring Caribbean leaders together to deal with the issue of non-communicable diseases. And what is interesting is that, in fact, that declaration of Port of Spain was used by many countries as a basis for the convention and the protocols that were established at the United Nations subsequently. But we in the Caribbean, when was the last time any Caribbean leader spoke about the Declaration of Port of Spain? In fact, I may dare so. Does he remember it? Does she remember it? And this is where it is very important that we engage our own philosophies, our own cultural philosophies to meet the challenges of tomorrow and of today. So as much as, in fact, for example, there is concern that the governments in the region feel that they need to have a greater say in the running of schools. Governments are not very well known for having a great say in the business of humanity. Thank you.
Right, thank you. And one other question. With the changing dynamics of the religious and denominational values amongst teaching staff, what plan or plans can be implemented to ensure that Catholic values remain a practice of the institution and not just a theoretical ideology?
Well, in Trinidad, for example, we have always depended on nuns to run the convents, to run St. Joseph Convent in San Fernando, to the Holy Name Convent in St. Joseph Convent in Port of Spain, Holy Faith Convent. We have always depended on nuns. Regrettably, there's a paucity of nuns to the point where, in fact, the principals of many Catholic schools, for example, convents, are run not by nuns, but by ordinary Christian persons. And I dare say, when one looks at the type of stewardship displayed by the convents, and I can speak with authority because my daughter went to St. Joseph Convent in Port of Spain. When one looks at the spiritual stewardship, I have family also down in St. Joseph Convent in San Fernando, in Holy Faith Convent in Pinal, and all the convents, Providence, St. Francois Girls. I have been listening, and most of them are run by by civilians, not people of the cloth, I can tell you, in fact, I detect an awesome spiritual strength among them and the continuance of strong religious values of the Catholic faith in all of these schools. And it has to do with the persons that we are producing. If you produce a strong Christian who becomes a teacher, that teacher will in fact be a repository of Christian values and will invariably in fact pass on those values to their charges. You don't have to be in fact wearing cloth, the proverbial cloth, to speak of messages of hope and compassion and caring and spirituality. So I feel, for example, there is this concern, the same thing, for example, with the brothers. I mean, I can tell you, at Presentation College in San Fernando, we have a principal in the form of Mr. Dexter Mitchell, who in fact is not a brother, is not a presentation brother. In fact, all the presentation brothers in Trinidad and Tobago are no more. And I can tell you that in fact that Mr. Dexter Mitchell, that principal, he is of the same magnanimity, spiritual magnificence, and spiritual influence as in fact the brothers that I personally experienced in my time. There hasn't been a drop in engaging spiritual values at Presentation College San Fernando because a civilian is in charge. I can tell you, for example, the principal, former principal of St. Joseph Convent, I mean, the very setting I'm talking about, climate emergency, without in fact any direction from the ministry, from the government. Imagine this. She instituted, by virtue of a teacher who taught geography, she instituted teaching in all subject areas of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations as part of, in fact, the 2030 Global Development Agenda. Because she felt, for example, even though, in fact, the governments of the region did not, in fact, put those things in the curricula, didn't have the vision to put it in the curricula, I should say. She on her own, years ago, started that. And this is the power of social evangelism and transnational evangelism in the context of humanity. So I feel, for example, there may in fact be some genuine concerns, but I feel, for example, that the body of teachers that are there in the schools, many of them who are Catholics, many of them who in fact are Muslims who went to Catholic schools, many of them who are Hindus who went to Catholic schools, they will have no problem with infusing in the system of teaching the spirituality that is required to push the nations of the region forward. Thank you.
Ramona, again, for those responses to the questions and the insights that you have shared with us. And I want to express our deep thanks on behalf of our 75th Anniversary Committee and our President, Mr. Adrian Francis, for all your insights. And I encourage our viewers and those of us on the various platforms, if you have missed it, to go back and take a listen to our featured speaker, His Excellency Justice Anthony Carmona, on the subject area that was discussed this evening. And I think there's quite a lot of content there that would spur and give you insights of what is happening and how we can make changes at least one step at a time as individuals. We now we now go into a poetry presentation for a few minutes, and then we come back to do some general announcements.
I am Parshawn Haynes from the Presentation Brothers College. The world has experienced diverse changes due to the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. These changes range from physical distancing, remote learning, mixed modality teaching, increased sanitization of hands, and most importantly, the wearing of a face mask. A mask has become a necessary accessory for daily interaction. Like a cell phone, we must have it. Now it seems like life under the mask has become the new normal. Covering the lower half of the face not only reduces the ability to communicate effectively, but also hinders interpretations and expressions of those with whom we interact. Under the mask, positive and negative emotions become indecipherable. I pause at this juncture to ask a question. How will this new norm affect the way in which we communicate? You may agree with me that the face is the most powerful tool in communication. A number of inferences can be made from one's facial expression about their physical health, emotional state, personality traits, among others. Masks usually hide the face, but during my interaction with many, I found humanity under the mask. Each obscured face, each pair of eyes, they all tell a different story. Whether it be about anxiety, loss of jobs, school, childcare, or the loss of a loved one due to COVID-19. According to Dr. Marina Canturiti, international linguist, having a significant part of the face covered means that some of the nuances during our daily interactions will be hidden. The mask covers our face and our ability to properly express emotions. This is shown with our society slowly losing emotions like empathy and genuine care and concern for others. Regardless of these differences, there's one similarity we all share. People mask their insecurities to be accepted. The fear of judgment or betrayal hidden behind a quiet introvert mask. A rigid and tough mask for those who once felt helpless. The ignorant mask for those who were once abandoned. An isolation mask for those who flee. While the mask was made to cover the face to prevent the spread of the COVID-19 virus, ironically, COVID-19 has uncovered so much of our social woes. The inadequacies within our education system, poor healthcare, over-dependency on tourism, which all translate to our country's vulnerability. The mask covers our mouths and noses, but opened our eyes to hidden realities in our backyard. I predict this challenging social and economic dispensation will continue for an undefined period of time, as this is real life under the mask. I thank you.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to our Brother Lennard Denehey Memorial Lecture. We thank you for those of you who have stayed with us for the time, and we hope that you have enjoyed so far our schedule of activities in this particular evening on the lecture. We now go into some general announcements from the 75th Anniversary Celebrations Committee, and to just give you some reminders of some events that are coming up in the months ahead. We want to continue to engage you to support our raffle, which will be drawn on August the 13th, 2022. We have prizes such as 2 nights at Koyaba Beach Resort, a refrigerator, 32-inch flat screen TV, smartphone, toaster oven, a pair of wireless earbuds, dinner for 2 at Umbrellas, breakfast for 2 at Radisson Beach Resort, breakfast for two at True Blue Bay Resort, and a spa treatment at Nirvana. That is all part of the prizes engaged in the raffle that is currently being conducted, and you can get tickets from all our representatives on the 75th Anniversary Committee. In May, we also plan to host a men's health fair on the 21st of May 2022. So look out for that, a hosting of a men's health fair on the 21st of May 2022. Our 75th PBC Anniversary Magazine launch is scheduled for June 2022. In August, PBC will hold a family day for the entire school community in addition to a fundraising fete. This is in August of this year, 2022. We also plan in November a special awards gala to honor our teachers, our parents, and students. And finally, we end our 75th anniversary calendar of events with a closing mass on January the 21st, 2023, obviously to give thanks for all the things that we would have achieved over the last 75 years and what was planned by the 75th Anniversary Committee, of course, for this year. We now invite Mr. Kerry Frank to give some closing remarks on this evening and on the lecture that was just delivered for this evening. Mr. Frank?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of another event forming part of our celebrations of the 75th anniversary of the Presentation Brothers College, celebrated under the theme, Celebrating PBC's Contribution to Nation Building. Tonight's sessions highlights the importance of Catholic education in forming characters that are equipped in fostering a readiness for service to the society. On behalf of the Presentation Brothers College community and the organizing committee, we express our gratitude to our featured speaker, His Excellency Justice Anthony Carmona, for an enlightening and edifying presentation. Your presentation reminds us of that education based on faith and strong values are essential in developing strong communities and societies. Your Excellency, thank you once more on behalf of the entire PBC family in Grenada. Minister Emmeline Pierre, we thank you for the comments provided at the start of the event. We thank you for your continued support and contribution to the college, both as a minister and as a parent. Our brother Robert Fanovich, our former principal at the college, we thank you for your presentation on Blessed Edmund Rice. You reminded us of the work done by Blessed Edmund Rice and the inspiration behind his mission of providing Catholic education to young men across the globe. Our dear Sister Maureen, we thank you for your contribution to the success of this evening's program, and we thank you for reminding us of the strong bonds that exist between the Presentation Brothers and the Sisters of St. Joseph of Cluny. We thank the sisters for the contribution they have made to our college over the past 75 years. We express thanks to Mr. Aaron Pierre and Dwight Sampson, members of the committee, for the roles performed in the execution of the program. Also thanks to Father Kufre, the cathedral administrator, for invoking God's presence on this evening's proceeding. And we thank Brother Dennis for his closing prayer, which will come subsequently. To Mr. Chairman and the members of staff of the PBC, we express our thanks for the valuable service provided in the organization and execution of this event. Mr. Adrian Francis, Chairman of the 75th Anniversary Committee, we thank you for your guidance and support provided to the subcommittee. We thank all the contributors for the questions posed and their contribution to dialogue on this important topic, exploring the role of Catholic education in forming strong characters for service to our society. We express our gratitude to all the viewers across the various platforms and thank you for your participation. We thank you once again and look forward to your support for the subsequent events of our year of celebrations of the Presentation Brothers College 75th anniversary.
Thank you, Mr. Frank. We now move on to invite Brother Dennis Clavots to lead us off in our closing prayer and blessings.
Brother Dennis. Your voice didn't not so well. It go well. So try to unmute yourself and do it again. You're still not good.
He's on mute. Brother Dennis, you're still on mute. He's on mute? Okay. So please go ahead.
Let me try it again.
Okay, Brother Dennis, we're getting a lot of background noise, so we may have to move it along. We thank you for being there and staying with us. We now move into the school song, which we're going to close off this evening's program with, and it is going to be played. So all of us in the school who know the song or don't know the song will listen and partake. So we now invite our producers to bring up our school song. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, and we close off the program with a set of tunes and songs from our choir. Again, we want to express thanks for those of you who have stayed with us in this important discussion on the Brother Lennard Denehey Memorial Lecture, and we hope that we have at least caused some thinking and instituted some sort of thought as it relates to and get you thinking about a lot of the issues that was raised by our featured speaker. And we really hope that it would have piqued your interest in certain areas. So again, we want to express thanks for you staying with us, and we wish everyone a good night.